First on film and entertainment, g'day to all, and we have got some good movies to talk about, maybe some not so good movies as well, but generally speaking, around about this time of the year, as I've said before, we're sort of into the Oscar season, and there's some pretty good product around. One of the things that surprised me, which we'll talk about later, is the latest Bridget Jones movie. But before we do that, there's a horror film to talk about, and there's also a movie which surprised me because I reckon this is the best performance of Pamela Anderson's career. I'm talking about The Last Showgirl. To join me to talk about this, Greg King. G'day, how are you doing, sir?
I'm good. How are you, Alex?
Very well, kindly. And Sandy Kay, hello.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Greg. Hello, Peter.
And Peter is the one that we're talking about, the recalcitrant one, the fossil, the guy who was there when Adam was but a boy. Hello, Peter Krause.
Hello from the pterodactyl. Hi, everyone.
G'day. Now, let's talk about The Last Showgirl, which I got to say is the perfect running time. We're talking under an hour and a half by 1 minute. Wow. M-rated movie. It's sort of a really gritty piece about the travails of an aging Las Vegas showgirl and those around her. It's got this real feel to it as far as I'm concerned. And back in the day, we're talking decades ago, the character played by Pamela Anderson, whose name is Shelley, was one of the headline acts in a show called La Razzle Dazzle. And that was fashioned on erotic para shows like Valido. She's now 57, so she's the eldest in the company. The company itself is way past its prime. But the showgirls, well, the show must go on, as they say, and they continue to put on happy faces and dress in sexy lingerie complete with rhinestones and feathers and, of course, the towering headdresses for which they're known. Truth be told, though, as I mentioned, the numbers have dwindled, those attending, and they've been overtaken by a new breed of entertainment. But Shelley takes pride in what she does, and for her, this is more than a job, it's a calling. That's not so much the case for her contemporaries, including rather pragmatic Mary Ann, played by Brenda Song, and an enthusiastic 19-year-old called Jodie, played by Kiernan Shipka. Shelley, well, she lives by herself, would dearly love a man in her life, and she's sailed troubled waters, unfortunately, in that regard. When she hits the latest speed bump, because a bloke she met on the site stood her up, she invites her friends around. And that includes an outspoken former dancer who's now a cocktail waitress called Annette, a role filled by Jamie Lee Curtis, somebody who wears far too much makeup in this particular production, deliberately, I might say. She left La Razzle Dazzle 6 years ago, but remains very close to Shelley and to the troupe. Now, in turn, the 19-year-old Jodie has extended the invitation to this soiree to the show manager, whose name is Eddie, played by Dave Bautista. And I'm kind of impressed because the more I see of Dave Bautista, I see that he's capable of doing more than sort of thuggish roles, and this is one example of that. In this case, he's a man of very few words who cares about Shelley. In fact, the pair of them has history, but there's also an awkwardness between them. Eddie drops a bombshell. The new casino owners where the show's been playing are calling time on La Razzle Dazzle. And you can imagine it does leave Shelley disconsolate. She has no idea what to do next. She does not embrace what she regards as the bump and grind of the new age reviews that I referenced at the beginning. Same time, she tries to reconnect with her now adult 22-year-old daughter, Hannah, played by Billy Lord.
I think you need the man who's going to be with us.
What was that? Some music sting in the background, which we will ignore. Anyway, the now adult 22-year-old daughter, Hannah, played by Billy Lord, who has a rather checkered upbringing. They have a strained relationship, mother and daughter. Hannah struggles to forgive her mum for the choices that she's made. So life's not easy for many of the players in this one. They strive to keep their heads above water, and there are no big pardons in The Last Showgirl. I reckon that's what makes it noteworthy, and it is a memorable movie. The writer is Kate Gersten, makes her feature writing debut. All the more plaudits to her for that. She's pulled no punches, and the film is all the better for it. Among the tinsel and confected glamour, everything is a bit of a scrap. The director is Gia Coppola. That's Francis Ford Coppola's granddaughter, the co-writer and director of Palo Alto. And she does a fine job letting the material breathe and painting a rather hardened picture. The cinematographer, Autumn Durand Arkpour, who did Black Panther Wakanda Forever, taps into the unrelenting grind that is the strip. And I really admired Natalie Zering's production design, which adds to the Last Showgirl's authenticity. A lot to be said for the music choices. Original numbers from Andrew Wyatt. He was responsible for music in Barbie. But the star of this show, unquestionably Pamela Anderson, who's not only maintained an enviable figure, but excels in the lead. She's really potent as the spirited and vulnerable Shelley, who has had her fair share of knocks in her life, and the pain is quite evident. Cast around is really good too. There's muscularity of voice and demeanour. I mentioned Dave Bautista. He revels in his less is more gentle giant approach to this one. And then Jamie Lee Curtis, my golly, presents as larger-than-life, gregarious, loud, and Kenan Shipka brings naivete to Jodie, and Brenda Song lives in the moment, wise to the vagaries of an uncertain industry. So certainly worthy of attention, The Last Showgirl. The tarnish is on full display, and I bought into it. What about you, Sandy?
I absolutely love this film for a host of different reasons. I've never been a Pamela Anderson fan, particularly given that I'm not male. So I never really ogled over her at all. But as you said, Alex, she looks fabulous. She sounds wonderful. And the personality that comes out of her in this role, she plays just such a sweet character. You can't help thinking that that's kind of who she is as a person also. We haven't seen her on anything really since those Baywatch days for quite a while. She's been on series like Home Improvement and VIP. And unbeknown to me, she came to fame and fortune when she first was Playmate of the Month for Playboy magazine in 1990.
Oh, yes, I do remember that. I've got
I do now.
just for research purposes, and of course, Sandy.
Her body looks the same as it did in those days. It's incredible. She's 57 years old now and she looks amazing. But her face, she's let it go. She doesn't seem to be plumping it up with Botox and fillers, and she doesn't seem to have tattooed eyebrows because they're very thin. And she's done all these appearances to promote the film without any makeup on whatsoever. So kudos to her for that. I thought her acting was wonderful. I thought the part she played was fabulous. And as an aging woman myself, you can really relate to not only one career coming to an end, and she's had, as you said, this long-standing career for 30 years as this showgirl. And it's like, what do you do now? How do you reinvent yourself? What is she going to do? She needs the money to live. She's struggled with her now 20-something-year-old daughter in bringing her up and having to pay attention to eking out an income at the same time as playing mum. And she's suffering in her adult relationship with her daughter as a result of not being able to pay full attention to the daughter. I kind of get that too for any woman who is either responsible for bringing home the bread or is interested in having a career. Something has to give if you've got kids, and that's it. I love the camaraderie between the Follies, the girls in the troupe themselves, and Jamie Lee Curtis was wonderful as really somebody, as a cocktail waitress who was really too old to be in that role already. It's kind of sad. The whole thing was really sad and really moving, but somehow uplifting at the same time, if that makes sense. I thought it was really deep, and it hasn't left me since I've seen it. I keep reflecting on all the various nuances that go on in this movie.
Totally agree with you. And it's interesting if you think about some of the names and the ages of the names that you've mentioned. It's been fortunate that with British cinema, you've got people who are well and truly over 60 and over 70 who continue to appear. Not so much that I'm cognizant of in US cinema. And you've had the resurrection of Demi Moore. I mean, well and truly, she's in fine form, obviously in The Substance, and Oscar nominated and so on. You've also got Jamie Lee Curtis, who keeps on keeping on, whether it's horror or doing something like this. and now you've got Pamela Anderson. So it's a year of revival. I'm very, very pleased to know that. And I'm also, because one of my greatest criticisms is you get a lot of movies where they put women in particular over the age of 65, and they're vacuous roles. They go off and they explore and find new love in Europe or places like that. And so many of them are disappointing, Sandy. So
I agree.
yeah, and so that I certainly hope that if there's decent scripts, and it gets back to the writing, if there's decent scripts for women over the age of 60 or 65, whatever it might be, well, then you can bring out the best in people. But if they're vacuous roles and you're playing airheads, I mean, that doesn't push anybody. So, Peter, what did you think of this movie, which The Last Showgirl?
Look, I liked it to some extent, but I have misgivings about the storyline and about some of the way it is shot. Gia Coppola has made an interesting decision to shoot the film in widescreen, handheld camera, and lots of close-ups. And of course, we see Pamela Anderson close up a lot of the time in the film. And I'm wondering sometimes, as I was watching the film, as if the film was lacking a backstory for her a little bit, and it was a little bit too superficial for my liking. And this is a case where I think the film wasn't long enough because it needed to develop her backstory, the mother-daughter relationship, and the Jamie Lee Curtis character, who I thought was such an interesting one when she does this impromptu total eclipse of the heart dance during the film. I thought, wow, this character deserves a bit more backstory and information. And it was nice to see Jason Schwartzman in a brief but telling role in the film. But there was just something about the film that was lacking for me in terms of the story development, in terms of the character development, even though Pamela Anderson is very good. Although I didn't like so much some of the close-ups that she was involved with.
So I thought, Nick, explain to me why you didn't like those close-ups, because they were raw.
They were raw, but they were repetitive. And I felt that they were not developing the character particularly, because I wanted more information, backstory, and so on. I mean, this is all part of the story about how young women initially are attracted to Broadway, to Hollywood, the Busby Berkeley type situation where they all want to be a star and they all want to make good in show business. And this could have been integrated more into this story as well. So, look, I think there's much to admire about The Last Showgirl, but there's also some aspects of the film that I wish were better developed.
I was going to say, though, that you got the picture. I mean, it was a slow bleed. You got the understanding as the movie unfolded as to what had gone on previously. Surely you didn't need that spelt out chapter and verse before you saw that was the purpose of the story. You didn't understand exactly what was going on with the daughter, and then when the daughter visits, you get that backstory, and you also get the backstory with her former lover, etc. I would have thought that's a lot of movies do it that way, Peter.
Well, I would have liked a bit more story and character development. It's a bit superficial. It's a bit dismissive. Yes, we are given information, but it's not developed particularly strongly, hence the short running time, which could have been expanded with a bit more storyline. So, yeah, I'll stick to my view of that.
89 minutes. Was that enough for you, Greg King?
Oh, yes, more than enough, actually. This is a good companion piece to the substance, the film you referred to earlier, because both films look at how women are treated in an industry that values youth and beauty over anything else, and which can lead to sort of problems. Peter referenced the handheld camera work, which gave us sort of an intimacy to characters there. I thought this was going to be much more bitchy backstage stuff too of the showgirls there, especially the younger showgirls. Yeah, I just thought there's going to be a lot more bitchy there. I did like Jamie Lee Curtis and that scene that you've referenced it where she's dancing on the tabletop to that Bonnie Tyler hit there. I like that scene. I thought that was good. Jamie Lee Curtis being something a little bit more vulnerable to this performance there. Pamela Anderson, yeah, we haven't seen a lot of her on the big screen. And this is a role that sort of gives her a perfect chance to showcase some of her acting talents, move maybe on that image of Baywatch that we all remember.
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree with you. So, were you surprised at how good this was, Greg?
Oh, I weren't expecting much from it, to be honest, when I went
And
into
that's
it.
the point that's exactly what I'm saying, that you go in there thinking, oh, well, yeah, easily dismissed. But I was suitably impressed. So was Sandy, obviously. Peter not.
And it's look at Las Vegas, sort of in all its imperfect glory.
Hedonism and all of those sorts of things as well. So, okay, so in terms of what you would fault about it, what would you highlight?
Oh, I agree. You didn't get a lot of depth about some of the characters there as well. Some of those things there. And look, it was a little bit, even though you like those short films there, you probably need a bit more insight into the backstory.
So it's the same point as Peter made. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so I suppose that we'll go from tallest to shortest, and we'll start with you then, Peter. Your score out of 10 for a movie that some people I think are going to really appreciate, and perhaps some more than others. The Last Showgirl, rated M, and we've talked about the running time. What would you give it?
Sure, I'll give it 6 out of 10.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What about you, Greg?
6 out of 10.
All right. So high marks are going to be Sandy and I. Sandy, go for it.
Oh, I'm giving it an 8. I really enjoyed it. And I agree with you guys where you didn't expect much from it. And when you walk into a film and you don't have expectations and you are blown away, as I was with this, then it makes it all the more better an experience. I really loved the nuances of this film, and I loved how it was shot on a small budget. I think Gia Coppola has done a fabulous job, and Pamela Anderson, really huge kudos to her for being brave enough to get out there and play this part. Yeah, definitely an 8, Alex.
And I've got an 8 to an 8.5. So there you go. So we really are quite divided in terms of our scores. But nevertheless, I think I certainly would say or commend it to you as a film that's worth seeing. That's The Last Showgirl on J-Air, 88 FM, first on Film and Entertainment. Sandy Kay, Peter Krause, Greg King, and yours truly, Alex First, with you. If you want to become a member, we would love to have you on board. $54. You just go to j-air.com.au. Put down your money and we'll be glad to have it because, that supports the station, 24/7 programming, some pretty good music and some talk and entertainment of all different forms. Let's turn to another movie called The Monkey. Now, this also is a short film, 98 minutes, MA rated, and dare I say it's a film with heaps of dastardly monkeying about. It's over the top, absolutely, you betcha it is, and it revels in beheadings, spearings, disembowelment, and explosions. So you've got humans splatter virtually everywhere. And no, I'm not trying to turn you off. I am not. This is a pitch black comedy based on a 1980 short story from Stephen King, written and directed by Osgood Perkins, who did the rather scary Longlegs not so many years ago. It follows a man named Hal Shelburne, who's terrorized by a drum banging, and they don't like to use the word toy, but I'm going to use it, by a drum banging toy primate that heaps misfortune on whoever possesses it. And we follow Hal and his minutes older twin brother Bill, who treats Hal shamefully. Now we're talking 2 time frames here, 1999 and the present day. These boys, Hal and Bill, the flower pot men, no, not quite, they were raised by their mother Lois, played by Tatiana Maslany. And that was because one day their father, Shelburne, played by Adam Scott, who was a pilot, went out to buy a packet of cigarettes and never returned. And Hal first comes across this monkey among his dad's belongings in a storage closet. As the dads travelled, as Shelburne travelled and flew about, he collected keepsakes for the boys. Be that as it may, this particular keepsake, the simian, is a portent of doom. It's bug-eyed, and once the key on the back of the animal is turned, all hell breaks loose. So when the monkey bangs on his drum, people die, always. So after their beloved, quirky and caring mum croaks it, the youngsters are brought up by their uncle and aunt. And you can guess what happens to them. It's not if they're knocked off, but how? The boys try to eliminate this chimp by chopping it up and throwing it down a dry well, but it always finds a way to return and wreak even more havoc. Now, a quarter of a century later, its mercilessness shows no signs of abating, even though the brothers have been estranged at that point for years. Now Hal, a single separated father, is trying to save his own son the emotional turmoil that he faced by seeing him only very sparingly. But the truth will out as brother Bill comes back into the picture. Now, one thing I should mention is the only time we see the boy's father is at the start of this movie. He's dressed in bloodied pilot's uniform and is trying to pawn this monkey with disastrous consequences. And that sets the scene for the movie that follows. Now, if you look at the book, and I'm not sure, Greg, I'll start with you on this one soon, but he's taken liberties with the Stephen King book, so I'm not sure whether you've read the book or not.
It's actually a short story in a collection of short stories called Skeleton Crew.
Right, oh, okay.
It has been expanded beyond what was on the page.
So it's not a book, it's just...
It's just a short story, an anthology of short stories written by Stephen King.
Okay, fair enough. Well, he's personalised it, Osgood Perkins. That's what I was getting at. And the most significant change is the addition of a twin. And Perkins wanted that brotherly dynamic, toxic though it is, because that's how Perkins, grew up. It is a wild, wild ride, The Monkey, and that's sort of a gross understatement. It's horror mixed with humour, distasteful and over the top, though some will see it. Others are going to wholeheartedly embrace it. And I think that was apparent when we saw it in the media preview. It's such an extreme movie that really capitalises on excess. And a line in the film references the fact that everyone will die sometime. I really appreciated the representation of the opposite good and bad twins by Christian Convery as children and by Theo James as adults. Tatiana Maslany's laid-back attitude as their mum also struck a chord with me. And really, the director and writer, Osgood Perkins, has embraced the grisly and the absurd. And as a result, this is the sort of film where you have to suspend belief, simply run with it to appreciate it. Don't dig too deeply into the plot. Among the most memorable scenes is one early on where a priest delivers a matter-of-fact eulogy. Can't say I've heard anything quite like that before. And then there's the imagery of the less than conventional ways to cark it, some of which will remain with me for a long, long time. And one thing is certain, the monkey's a killer, all right, isn't it? So, Greg, what did you think of this chimp of a movie?
Oh, look, this is a bit of fun. A lot of the gesture, the gory body explosions and gore there is actually played for sort of uncomfortable laughs there. So you find yourself laughing at some inappropriate moments there. And this is one of two gory horror films around town at the moment. The other one is that Hungry Eyes, and which plays it much more seriously with the way bodies are torn apart and killed there. But this one is a lot of fun there, and you don't quite know what's going to be happening as the film keeps going there, and the relationship between the two estranged brothers sort of comes to a crunch in the climax there. But I found myself enjoying this more than I thought I would. But as I said, it's taken liberties, or as you said, it's taken liberties with a short story that wasn't sort of particularly memorable, and they've made something a bit more memorable out of it.
Yeah, which is great. I mean, that shows creative talent, and that's a good thing to actually do. Now, Peter, I hesitate to even ask you about this one, but let go for it.
Okay, my view. I preferred Osgood Perkins' previous film, Longlegs, with Nicolas Cage, because I thought that was a good mix of the horror genre and the drama. This one moves into the horror satire sort of field, and we've been seeing a number of films, as Greg mentioned, one, and of course Hard Eyes was another one, where we mix over the top murders, killings, beheadings, slasher type situations with a sort of satiric bent attached to it. I must admit, this one didn't convince me at all. I thought it was a very uneasy mix of those two sort of genres. And the toy, the monkey toy, didn't make a great deal of sense to me. I thought it was there as an object, which didn't really have any particular relevance to the plot. It was just a device to try and get more murders and slasher scenes into the film. I was disappointed by this film. I was expecting it to be a lot stronger, perhaps a bit funnier, perhaps a bit cleverer, and yet it turns out to be none of the above, unfortunately. So, no, I'm not a great rep for this film.
Okay.
I think the Stephen King story was supposed to have had a bit of a model to it too, about being careful what you wish for.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I suppose, yeah, you can see this in the movie as well. Now, Sandy, I wouldn't have thought this is your kind of film, but go for it.
Oh my gosh, I hated it.
You hated it?
Absolutely detested it.
Right.
I haven't felt as strongly in the negative about a film for a long time as this one.
Why?
But
Because
yeah, well, right, I'm not the target audience. I mean, the theatre that are in, people were laughing their heads off, almost
yeah, and
literally.
that's the point. Now, this is what I was going to say to all of us. Okay, so Peter, do you accept that this is not for you because it's aimed at a different audience or not?
You have to acknowledge the audience it's aimed for, but as a film reviewer, you have to see it as you see fit.
Well, that's what Sandy's saying as well, but she's acknowledging, which I sat next to a couple of youngsters who were filled with glee throughout, Sandy, as you've just described. And
What I noticed that there was mainly young men, because I spent a lot of time looking around the audience to see who were laughing so heartily, and it was young men. This is a young man's movie, although my old man partner sitting next to me was laughing out loud also. I couldn't believe it, because he usually really likes a serious, deep movie, and this is anything but that. Stupid antics, gore just for the sake of gore, heads falling off, blood spurting out, people being electrocuted. I don't find any of that particularly funny at all. But again, I'm not the target audience. Young men, old men, and I don't mean to be sexist here. Maybe some women were laughing too. I couldn't see any or hear any cackling, but no, I mean, it's well done, I suppose, for what it is. I can't disregard that. And I mean, when it's a Stephen King takeoff, that's kind of what you expect. You know that it's going to be a whole lot of creepy stuff and retro and all of that. So yeah, okay, I knew that's what we were going to have. The acting, yeah, it was good. The only thing I got really out of it was that one of the twins, who, when he's grown up, was actually very good looking. So I was enjoying looking and listening to his voice.
But the interesting thing, they were played by the same actor.
Oh, were they? I didn't even know that. Really? Wow. Well, then he's pretty brilliant, really, because he didn't look good as his twin brother at all. That's interesting. Okay. Well, I enjoyed looking at him. I certainly didn't enjoy looking at anything else. I'm not one for blood spilling ridiculously. I mean, even, if you compare this to the shock horror of the Demi Moore movie, The Substance. I mean, I don't like blood and gore at the best of times, and I had to cover my eyes a couple of times during that movie, but the blood made sense in that movie. Here it was just blood for blood's sake, gore just to be titillating and for shock value. Was it hilarious? No, I didn't think so, not one little bit. But everybody dies and that's life. Yeah, that's true. I didn't need this movie to paint me that picture.
I suppose, Sandy, it also goes to the heart of arguments that have been around now for quite a number of years about the propensity of movies in general to depict violence in such a way that anybody who's in any way left of centre or gets motivated by something like this can turn it into real life. I mean, it's a very difficult judgment, because I, like you, I mean, I don't like guns, I don't like violence, I don't like explosions, and I don't know whether you, Greg, or Peter, I wouldn't imagine either of you do either. So, I mean, is it
real life? But on the screen, I don't mind them.
Well, that's it. That's what I was getting at. So you can differentiate, but if somebody goes along to a cinema, and we've had incidents where people shoot up cinemas and people die, and they get the wrong ideas. Do violent movies, TV shows, plays, do they motivate them? I suppose that's the discussion I'm triggering now, Greg. Is that not a concern?
Goodness, this goes all the way back to Clockwork Orange and so many other films. Do films cause bad behaviour, or are they triggers for people who already have that in their system?
Yeah, and look, I suppose that bear in mind what Hollywood's done in recent times, okay? So there's this diversity whereby you've got to have a certain number of diverse actors in virtually every movie, if I'm not mistaken. Now, do they take measures with regards to violence in movies, Peter? I'm not aware that they've done anything in that regard. They've just let the blood flow, so to speak. Should they?
Well, it's arguable, but I don't think that that films cause the sorts of things that you might be alluding to.
Well, I don't know, and I mean ultimately, surely there would have been some research on this, or if there hasn't been, there should be some research on this. What's your view, Sandy?
I don't really have an opinion on that. Does it bring out the worst of us, the ones that enjoy it? Yeah, probably. I think you probably have to have a tendency or
Yes.
for that sort of stuff. I tend to agree with you there.
Yeah, there have been so many psychological studies about the impact of images on individuals, and the jury remains out because there is nothing definitive that says if you watch something, you will replicate it. It's only for people, perhaps, who have something in their system, they have psychological disturbances and so on, and are looking for a trigger. And that could be a book, it could be a film, it could be a theatrical production, it could be anything.
A video game.
Video game, yes.
That's
Good example. But I mean, okay, so let me extend this conversation briefly to deal with the daily news. I know a number of people of our age who are no longer watching the news because it's too terrifying for them. Now, again, that's real life. The world is a shitty place, right? It can be a great place, but it's been pretty terrible for a long time, and it's getting it's not a word, terribler, and so and yet as shitty as it is, not enough is being done to dampen the negativity. So. Are we feeding the beast, Peter, is the question.
Well, are you talking about social control and about censorship?
Yeah, I'm merely posing the question because clearly whatever we've been doing, violence in our own city, and this is a podcast that comes out of Melbourne. I mean, violence in our own city, home invasions, burglaries, God knows what else, carjackings, youths running riot. It's far worse than when we were born, Peter. Now, there's also 28 million or 28 million people in Australia now. So I get all of it. But notwithstanding that, I mean, we're talking in a week where we've had 2 senior cops stood down, right? In terms of and law and order is a major, major issue. So, this is what films the beauty part about movies is they transport you to different places. And to me, it's not so much of a jump to go from, seeing violence in all its forms, whether it's supposedly entertaining or not, to real life and what we have about us. That's the reason I'm asking the question, Peter.
Yeah. I mean, I don't agree with the analysis that you've made. And don't forget, we've got media now, social media, and so much more that amplifies so much about what we see and hear. And I mean, you could argue that in the going back 20, 30, 40 years, there was lots of violence around, but it wasn't reported because media wasn't as obvious at that time. So, look, I don't think this is a valid argument. I think the psychological studies clearly show that there is no direct correspondence between viewing violence or correlation between viewing violence and committing violence, because most of us have functions that stop us from doing that.
It's interesting. I'll go one stage further and then I'll move on. But there are suggestions now that if somebody sees a violent act, rather than stepping in and helping, they'll film it. Now, what does that say about our society, Sandy?
I think we're way too dependent on our phones, and we view everything through the lens of our phones. It's interesting, though, as a former television reporter, and you would agree with this too, Alex, that you could go into any situation with a camera and you felt completely safe, you felt covered. And I think that's the way people feel now with their phones. That's the instant reaction, whether it's violence that you're witnessing, you automatically film it. Whether it's a concert that you go to, you automatically start filming it on your phone. It's a level of protection somehow that distances us from what is actually happening that we've all become so accustomed to that it's a natural habit. I'm not sure it's a very good one.
No, I look, unfortunately, I'm not sure whether you have or not, Sandy, but I covered death. I covered bushfires. I'd seen dead people. It wasn't a nice experience. It stayed with me, and as it should. And so I think you're right, Peter, that, many people can differentiate between one and the other, but there've also been many instances where violent acts, and they've quizzed the people who've been prosecuted, and they admit that there's been triggers, for what they've done, and seeing violence on screen apparently is one of those triggers. So I'm not questioning that the jury is out, rather than it's quantifiable evidence, but I think it's an important point to raise when you're seeing a brutal movie like this one, which, after all, this is black humour. That's the nature of it. I'm not even sure we're allowed to say use those two terms together, but you get my gist by saying what I'm saying. All right, let's move on to another movie. Which,
what about our scores for this one, Alex?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I haven't even scored. Okay. Let's do this. So I'll probably go high ball on this one compared to the rest of you. So let's start with you, Sandy.
3.
3 out of 10. Okay.
Yeah. That's just
pretty
because
steady.
of the production values that I thought were quite good and how good looking he is.
Gee. All right.
Hey, I would have done that with something like Showgirl or something, because of how good Pamela Anderson looks. You probably would have decried us.
Yeah, maybe. Although she actually doesn't look that good, really, Greg, does she? I mean, her body's good, but her face is not really good at all. She's really bearing all of her 57 years there. I mean, she ain't the sex symbol that she once was. I mean, this guy I'm talking about here, he's, in his 30s or maybe early 40s, and he's definitely a bit of eye candy. But, I mean, you're a man of a certain age, so if you still see Pam Anderson as a bit of eye candy, I guess that's your prerogative.
You're getting all hot and bothered again here, Sandy. This is very...
I'm hot. No, I'm not. I felt,
All right. Well, regardless... Sorry, Greg, you were going to respond?
No, I said my bit. I'll pull my head in now.
Very good. All right. Well, don't pull your head in too much. Give me a score for the monkey.
I liked it. A bit of a guilty pleasure. I'd go for 6 to 6.5.
Right. And it's MA rated 98 minutes. Go on, Peter. I'm scared to ask. Go for it.
This discussion is almost turning into the Vogue review of how people look on screen.
Yes.
Anyway, no, I give Monkey 5 out of 10.
Okay, so 3, 5, 6, and I'm high mark at 7. I looked at it through the lens of the audience that it's coveting, and in spite of everything that I've said, where I don't like violence, etc., if you look at it as cartoon violence, perhaps that's the way to do it. And I mean, it's really an excuse to see one more form of garrotting or killing or whatever, which I must admit, as a concept, doesn't appeal to me. But I see what they've done and why they've done what they've done. Let us move on to a movie. Greg, you've been surprised by the couple of films we've talked about thus far. Here's another one that I dare say, well, you'll feel the same way about. And that's the latest Bridget Jones movie. Did you? I mean, before I talk in any detail about it, were you surprised at how surprisingly good or better you went?
Well, I thought I would. When I went in there, I had no expectations whatsoever, because it's the 4th film in the series. It's been 9 years since the last one, and a couple of Bridget Jones sequels were pretty ordinary. So I didn't know what to expect from this one, but I found myself pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised that they're going back to the well again. Like, really? They want to do it again? I understand what Tom Cruise and whatever have done with Top Gun, and that worked very well. Even though, was it you, Peter, who didn't like Top Gun, the sequel?
Correct.
Yeah. Is there anything you liked, Peter? Sorry, no.
There were plenty of films I've liked.
Okay, good. I'm very pleased to hear that. Okay, so, well, I'll start with that question from you. Were you pleasantly surprised or not about Bridget Jones? I can almost taste your answer. Bridget Jones mad about the boy.
It's delicious. No, I was not pleasantly surprised.
Of course not. No. And Sandy, I want you to see this one and see from a female perspective. Have you seen any of the Bridget Joneses?
I've seen enough to know that I didn't want to see this one. And so you can have this one all to yourselves. I'm really not interested. And from what I have heard so far about it, Renee Zellweger's acting prowess has depreciated with her youth. I can't. I mean,
Has song she won the Oscar for Judy.
This is the first film since Judy that
Yeah.
she's done. Yeah. And I think she does what she does. It's a joy-laden movie. There's Bridget Jones mad about the boy. It's long. It's probably longer than it needed to be at
Yes.
2 hours and 5 minutes. It's M-rated, and it as far as I'm concerned, pardon me, it could be equal to the best Bridget Jones film. I mean, it dates back to 2001, wasn't it, Greg? That it started, something like that.
Like that, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, Jones also narrates as that's what she does, and it's filled with laughter and romance and reverence, and best of all, she gets to be a cougar, Sandy, right?
Yeah, good. What are you saying? Something that I can relate to, huh?
No. There's no implication. All you'd need to do, Sandy, is snap your fingers. The boys would come running. Let's be honest. Come on, of all ages, shapes and sizes. Yeah. Anyway, and all joking aside, there's sort of this toy boy hot to try. See, you could have seen this movie just for the toy boy, Sandy.
No, thanks. I'm
No?
good.
Okay. So let me tell you a little bit about this story. Her husband, the love of her life, I'm talking about Bridget Jones, Mark Darcy, played by Colin Firth, is no longer. He was killed in an explosion while on a humanitarian mission in Darfur 4 years earlier. So Bridget was left as a widow, a couple of small children to raise, and she still dreams of him, misses him terribly, as do the children, a 10-year-old son called Billy and a daughter, Mabel, who was 6. And her life is rather chaotic. She hasn't moved on. Most of her friends tell her she desperately needs a shag. So one day, she decides to try to take control of her own future. And with a choice description, one of her besties even signs her up to a dating app. But it's while trying to rescue her children from the branches of a large tree in a park that fortune really smiles upon her. And that's when she and they are rescued by a handsome groundkeeper. He's a groundkeeper in his late 20s, whose name happens to be Roxter McDuff. Now, is Roxter a real name? Roxter. Can anybody? Yes, no? Made up?
It's American. Made up.
Yeah, okay. So I don't know of anybody. Clearly, I'm not well read enough, Sandy, but is there a real Roxter in real life? Somebody who's named Roxter?
I don't know any. Do you? You don't know anyone called that? But wait up. For the next generation of babies born, there may well be.
Okay, hang on. I'm now, while we're talking now, folks, I'm Roxter as a name. I'm Googling it.
There are no such thing as real names anymore. It's not a commonly recognised name, but it does appear as a surname, particularly in the UK. That's it. No, they've made it up.
Yeah, okay. Well, but hang on. Aren't all names made up?
Not all, no. I don't think so. Well, I guess eventually.
They are, because, I mean, before names were, somebody had to name things and they made them up.
No, so your name of the future.
Well, yeah, I actually don't mind it. The interesting thing about it, and it doesn't matter whether I mind it or not, but the interesting thing is of late, in the last decade or so, the X's in names have become quite common, haven't they, Sandy? There's a lot of X's in names. It used to be a CK.
That's true.
Yeah, there you go. So Gregory, I'm not sure how you'd put an X into Greg, but I'm sure they'd find a way. It could be a silent X.
Grex.
Grips.
It's kind of like the grits that somebody has in America and their cereal. Anyway, we're getting back to the movie. You've got this handsome groundkeeper, late 20s, that texts Bridget Jones, and suddenly everything's looking up, including the fact that she's actually reclaimed her old job. If you remember, she was a television producer. She hadn't been working, according to this movie, for a period of years. Also in the picture, and he does what he does so damn well, is Jones's male pal, former lover, the lascivious Daniel Cleaver, played by none other than Hugh Grant, who is just killing him at the moment. I mean, whatever he does seems to turn to gold. And that's not to overlook a new science teacher at the school that Billy and Mabel attend, whose name is Scott Wallaker, played by Chiwetel Ejiofor. He's got a distinct way of rounding up children. Would you countenance that, Greg? No. Right.
The whistle's only good for PE classes.
PE classes, okay. Does it work on dogs and small children at home? I don't know. Anyway, that's what he does. Now, Helen Fielding, who wrote the book Bridget Jones's Diary, which was the starting point for the film franchise, she also has a big hand in writing all the film scripts, of course. And also back on the writer's desk is Dan Mazer, who co-wrote Bridget Jones's Baby. And then there's Abby Morgan. I'm getting music again. Who's music playing in the background here? Now, collectively, they have done what I think is a terrific job. Many of the sight gags, the one-liners are priceless. And each Bridget Jones film has a different director. This time it's Michael Morris, who takes to the task with relish and injects a great deal of feeling. I thought the cast was in fine form. What a formidable group of actors they are. Jones never takes herself too seriously and is primarily upbeat. And I thought Renee Zellweger was delightful and assured as the film's centerpiece, like putting on an old dressing gown. And we've said, well, Hugh Grant really in his element as the gleefully inappropriate Daniel Cleaver. And Leo Woodall does and says all the right things as Roxton McDuff, and Chiwetel Ejiofor is intelligent and responsible as Mr. Wallaker. And he sort of eases up as the movie goes on. A couple of the really great roles in this one. Emma Thompson, wow, flawless as Jones's friend and gynecologist. And Isla Fisher, our very own, makes sure she's noticed as a harried mother, next door neighbour to Bridget Jones. Quite a memorable cameo from her. And on it goes. I mean, there's a lot brought back here from the past movies. So many juicy parts in this offering. One thing is for sure, Mad About the Boy outshone my expectations. I was worried about them dipping back into it again, but I needn't have fretted because, truth be told, I really enjoyed myself. The movie hangs together really beautifully and puts a big smile on your face. Who could ask for more? Greg King?
Not a lot more. Look, as I said at the start, I wasn't expecting much from this fourth instalment, but I was pleasantly surprised by the film. I'm much of a Hugh Grant to Zellweger's committed performance as Bridget Jones, who experiences many awkward, embarrassing incidents in the film, which is part of the ongoing charm of the film there. Now, this also repeats some of the beats from the first film there, where she's got to make a choice between two potential suitors there, the hunky rockster and the straight-laced Mr. Wallaker there. But I thought she threw herself into this role with comfortably, with all the character flaws and idiosyncrasies there. And there's plenty of physical comedy and lots of pratfalls, which she does well. Snappy one-liners and sight gags, but it also deals with more serious themes like overcoming grief, family, and the trials of single parenthood. Yeah, so it adds a bit more heft to the material there. And there's an element of sadness permeating the early segments of this film when she's dealing with the loss of Mr. Darcy there. Also an air of nostalgia there with the casting of bringing back all the main characters from the other Bridget Jones films with cameos from people like Jim Broadbent. I loved Emma Thompson as the gynecologist there. And I agree, Hugh Grant is one of the best things in the film there. He gets some of the biggest laughs here, and no one plays a lecturer's reprobate quite like he does.
No, I totally agree. Peter, was there any redeeming feature for you?
Look, I liked Emma Thompson. I liked some humorous bits in the film. I liked the depiction of the two children, who I thought were really nicely portrayed, helping Bridget through her grief to some extent. But I felt that it's the Bridget Jones character, the way it's depicted in this film, that was a problem for me. She comes across as childlike, as regressive, and as silly at times. And I don't know if that's the way the character should be depicted. I thought it would be a little bit more adult and a bit more mature. And because of that...
But I mean, go back to 2001. that's her. Do people change character? I mean, she was an adult in the first installment as well, right? 20 years ago. She'd be what, 50-ish now, I presume? That's the sort of
Correct. Well, when it was first depicted, it
Yeah.
was right for her character. But she has experienced grief. She's experienced a lot of things over the 20 plus years over the 4 films now. And I would have thought that the character would also have grown up, developed, and become more interesting. So when the other characters in the film, like Hugh Grant and everyone else, becomes more amusing and valid and interesting, then you know you're in trouble with the central character. And Bridget Jones.
Let me just interrupt there for a moment. Unfortunately, I've got a really good friend of mine, and she's gone through quite a bit in recent times, but a really buoyant sort of personality. Now, I've known her for a long, long time, and even through the down times, she has maintained the same persona, which I admire so much. And so, I mean, I think this is, I'm afraid that I think this is real, even though it's an imagined character. I get that. But I actually thought it was, pinpoint accurate, and I thought it was appropriate. So I've got a totally different view of that. Keep going though, please.
Yeah, okay, I'll disagree with you because I felt that the depiction of the character was regressive, and that's the problem that I have with it. Look, there are some little nice bits here and there, and the idea of her sorting out which of the 2 suitors, so to speak, are going to be her love interest, which probably will create another Bridget Jones film. But I was waiting for a diary, and there's hardly one in sight. I would have liked.
That's the word diary out of the title this time.
That's right. And I thought, yeah, I don't know. Look, the film is not bad, but it's certainly not the great, humorous, brilliant sort of 4th version of Bridget Jones that perhaps some people are saying it is.
It's certainly better than Bridget Jones' Edge of Reason.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, well, okay. So, Peter, you've seen all of them, I'm presuming.
Yes.
Where would this one sit of the 4? Second best?
No, I put it as number 4. I think the first one was the best one. The second one was not bad, and the third one had its moments here and there. But the 4th one, I think, has reached a lower level for me.
Now, I don't think this is going to influence you in any way, Sandy, but somebody who I know, who I don't know very well, but who basically reads reviews or reads various reviews, and I recommended this to her, sent me a short text because she wasn't going to see this movie, right? Like, you're not going to see the movie. And she said, this is what I'm reading this out without naming her, saw Bridget Jones today and loved it with love hearts all over it. So there you go, Peter. There are people who, we've got an influence here, and I don't want you to turn everybody off. Bridget Jones, Mad About a Boy. I'm going to start this one, rated M, 125 minutes. I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. Greg?
6 out of 10.
Peter, are you passing it?
Yes, but I didn't realize that we had to promote films and always give a good review. I thought we were meant to give our own opinions rather than being pushed into something. So
I don't always promote it. I couldn't get more honest about my opinions on it.
yeah,
Exactly. And cars have rack and pinion steering too, Peter. Now,
what's that?
it's old style. That's all I can say. No. Excuse me. There are movies. I suppose I enjoy. No, I won't say enjoy. When you're writing a negative review or speaking about something in a negative way, I don't love everything. My worst movies of the year are appalling, right? So but I suppose at times maybe I'm more charitable, or I look at the audience and sort of say, okay, well, I can see merit in that from their perspective. That's kind of the only difference of opinion that you and I have. Well, no, we have a lot of differences of opinion. You don't support any football team, in particular Essendon. I haven't mentioned Essendon for a while, Peter. Do you want to talk about the Bombers?
I give Bridget Jones 5 out of 10.
Good on you, Peter.
Oh, golly. All right.
It is the UK's biggest film franchise, I have to say.
It had the biggest box office opening of any romantic comedy in Britain.
Is that right?
Yep.
How's it done in Australia? I haven't really followed it. Is there any data?
I don't know, but that's what I heard on the news on the weekend.
I thought James Bond would be the biggest British franchise.
Yeah, that's what I would have thought too. And by the way, this week they've sold it, haven't they? They've not sold
Amazon, which is going to be the death of it, I think.
that.
Yeah.
I was pretty staggered by that too. I mean, they retain 50% Barbara Broccoli. Is that her name?
Yes.
And who's the other one? I've gone blank. There's two of them.
Yeah.
I apologise. We've got to go. I've just realised. Sandy, what a pleasure. Peter, it's an ordeal, but it's a pleasure. Saying
I love you, Peter. Don't put up play, Alex.
no, we love you, Peter. We do. Sticks and stones will break my bones. We love you, and Greg, we love you too. You know this.
Thank you.
This is a love.
Can you feel the love in the room?
Oh yeah, on that. And Sandy, you're gorgeous. You know, as I've said, love all around. Speak to you next week, folks. First on Film and Entertainment, over and out.